Iran is about to get access to a huge cash lifeline. Just 3 months after sanctions lift, Iran will be able to move money around just like the biggest banks in the world. This will be when Iran rejoins SWIFT, or the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. Iran was cut off from SWIFT back in 2012 in an effort to curb its nuclear ambitions. But our next guest warns that it will make it much easier for Iran to fund terrorism. We are joined now by an expert in terrorism funding, Mark Dubowitz, Defense and Democracy's Executive Director. Mark, thank you for being here. There are so many issues that I can think of where it is so hard to track the funding for terrorism, especially in the age of ISIS. They're brilliant at hiding money. Can Iran do the same, especially under the international microscope they're under right now?
Sure, they will be able to, because scores of Iranian banks are going to be readmitted onto SWIFT. And so you've got all these banks on SWIFT. You've got billions of dollars of financial transactions moving around the world. And it'll be much easier for Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps to actually use these banks and to use the financial channels to hide financial transactions targeted and dedicated for terrorism.
Okay, so let's talk about where the money would go. Because Iran, of course, denies that they have any terrorist activity in their country. They deny any ties to ISIS or to al-Qaeda in Iraq. Where would the money go? Where would the funding go, do you think, if this actually came to happen?
The funding is going to go to Iran's allies. It's going to go to Hezbollah, a designated terrorist organization operating out of Lebanon. Okay. It's going to go to Iraqi Shiite militias designated by the United States operating in Iraq. It's going to go to the Assad government. It's going to go to Houthi rebels. In fact, it's going to go around the world to Iranian elements globally. And the financial system will have a very, very difficult time tracking this money.
I guess the reason that I'm skeptical that they would be able to so easily do this is because whether it's with Sudan or other, terrorist groups around the world, even in parts of Asia, you've got inspector generals here in this country that are looking constantly, forensic accountants looking for these types of transactions. I would think the Iranians would have a hard time hiding it because of the criticism of them right now. Maybe I'm being naive, but I would think that we would be all over it, basically.
Well, remember, that's Iran today, but in about 6 to 12 months, all of the EU sanctions are going to be lifted. Many U.S. sanctions are going to be lifted. Iran's going to be readmitted back into the global economy, and their banks are going to be readmitted back into the global financial system. So it's not Iran today, the pariah. It's Iran in 2, 3, 4, 5 years as they become a respected partner. And at that point, I agree with you. In the early days, financial institutions will be cautious, but as the trade
because they don't want to get busted. That's not. I should have said that. But look, Bank of America, Credit Suisse, that Barclays. I mean, some of these, especially the European banks, have been caught in this in the past. They don't want to be caught, so they're the ones that are on guard, if you will.
They're the ones on guard. Look, the Russians and Chinese and Indians and others are going to go back in earlier. The European banks are going to be much more cautious, and the U.S. banks will be even much more cautious. But there will be a point in time where the European banks will be back in. And in fact, what you're seeing now is that under this agreement, the export development banks of Europe, the sort of export-import banks, are going to be providing Ex-Im financing for projects in Europe. And that provides a political and financial cover for the private institutions to slowly make their way back in.
I have a feeling they're going to be watching the French banks really closely. Mark, thank you very much for the commentary. Mark Dubowitz, Defense and Democracy's Executive Director. Appreciate it, sir.
Thanks, Cheryl.